A white police officer confronts a black woman outside a courthouse and orders her, disrespectfully, to clear the area. When she refuses to back down, he grabs her and knocks her to the ground, with no idea that the woman he just assaulted is a sitting judge. Will he walk away from this? Subscribe so you don't miss the next part of the story, and drop a comment. What would you have done in her place? The early morning light stretched in long shadows across the courthouse steps, and the cool air did nothing to loosen the knot that had settled in Amanda Braun's chest. The day had barely started, and she already knew it would be one of the toughest of her career. As a respected judge, Amanda was used to pressure, but this morning was different. The case waiting for her inside had become a flashpoint for the racial tension simmering just beneath the city's surface. It was yet another police brutality case, but this time the whole community had its eyes on it. Every ruling, every sentence she uttered would be picked apart, argued over, praised or condemned. There was no margin for a misstep. Amanda paused on the courthouse steps, taking in the scene. Protesters were already gathering along the street, signs bobbing above the crowd, chants for justice bouncing between the buildings. News crews had staked out their spots, cameras trained and ready. Officers ringed the perimeter, supposedly to keep order, though their presence seemed to feed the tension rather than calm it. Amanda breathed in slowly, her chest tight. She'd sat through hard cases before, but this one felt different. It felt personal. Her phone buzzed against her hip. She let it go unanswered. Nothing could compete for her attention today. She squared her shoulders and made herself walk forward, each step heavier than the last, as though the city's expectations were riding on her back. Whatever verdict came out of that courtroom, she knew its ripples would travel far past the walls of the building. As she started toward the entrance, a hard voice sliced through her thoughts. "Hey, you can't be here. This area's off limits." Amanda turned, startled to find a tall, heavily built officer striding toward her, tense, one hand resting near his belt like he was braced for a confrontation. His jaw was set, his eyes narrow with suspicion. "I'm sorry?" Amanda lifted an eyebrow, her voice level but firm. "I said you can't be here," he repeated, planting himself just a couple of feet away. "This is a courthouse, not a spot for civilians to wander through. Move it." Amanda's patience, already thin, frayed further, but she held her composure. She'd handled overbearing officers before and knew how to manage them, yet something about this one cut deeper than usual. "Officer Thompson," she said evenly, reading his badge, "I think you've got this wrong." "I don't have anything wrong," he snapped. "This area's restricted. You don't belong here." The words landed like a slap. "You don't belong here." Amanda drew another breath, forcing herself to stay level. She didn't have time for this, not today of all days. "I'm Judge Amanda Braun," she said, keeping her voice steady, despite the anger building underneath. For an instant, confusion crossed Thompson's face. Then it curdled into a sneer. "Judge Braun? You've got to be joking. You don't look like a judge." The remark stung, but Amanda didn't so much as blink. She'd run into this brand of prejudice plenty of times before. People often struggled to picture a black woman in a position of real authority, and this wasn't the first time someone had questioned whether she'd earned her seat. She refused to let his small-mindedness rattle her. "No," she said flatly, "I'm not joking." Thompson's sneer vanished. He stepped closer, hand still hovering near his belt, his voice dropping into something more threatening. "Look," he growled, "I'm done dealing with people trying to pull this kind of stunt. Get moving before you regret it." Amanda's heart sped up. Disbelief and fury rose in her chest all at once. This was her courthouse, and here was an officer threatening her without bothering to listen to one word she said. Her voice stayed calm on the surface, though inside she was boiling. "I don't think you understand the mistake you're making, officer." Before she could say another word, his hand shot out and clamped around her arm, his grip tight with frustration. Her pulse jumped as the reality of what was happening set in. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he hissed. A jolt of adrenaline shot through her. She wrenched her arm free, her voice sharpened. "Let go of me." Instead of releasing her, he tightened his hold, and then, in a burst of anger, shoved her hard enough to send her stumbling backwards. Her heels skidded on the steps, and before she could catch herself, she went down, slamming into the concrete. Pain radiated through her side as the rough surface tore at her skin. For a moment, the world blurred. Pain, shock, disbelief, all tangled together. How was this happening? She tasted blood as she struggled to catch her breath. Around her, voices murmured, a crowd gathering. Some people had already pulled out their phones to film her. Others just stood frozen, watching. "Isn't that Judge Braun?" someone whispered nearby. The murmur spread, and Amanda felt the weight of dozens of stares pressing down on her, yet no one moved to help her. They only watched, too stunned to act.
Thompson seemed to finally register what he'd done. The color drained from his face as he looked down at her, his anger replaced by something closer to panic. "I didn't," he stammered, backing away, his hand dropping from his belt. Amanda fought to sit up, her vision still swimming. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, sounding impossibly far away. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and stared at the blood smeared across her fingers. "Officer Thompson!" a voice barked, cutting through the noise. Amanda recognized it instantly. Jacob Harris, her longtime colleague. He shoved through the onlookers, his face a mixture of rage and worry. "Amanda, are you all right?" He dropped to his knees beside her, hands hovering, unsure where it was safe to touch. "I'm fine," she muttered, though the sharp ache in her side told a different story. Every breath was a small battle, and her head still spun from the fall. Jacob rounded on Thompson, his voice climbing. "What is wrong with you? Do you have any idea who she is?" Thompson said nothing. He was already backing off as more officers arrived and swarmed the scene. Amanda felt herself fade into the noise and chaos around her, her body still shaking, her mind already racing to make sense of what had just happened. "I need to get inside," she whispered to Jacob. "I need to be in that courtroom." "No, you need a hospital," Jacob insisted. She shook her head. "I can't, not now, not today." Jacob hesitated, studying her face for any sign she couldn't push through this. Finally, he exhaled and gave in. "Fine, but you're getting checked out the second this is over." Amanda nodded and let him help her up. Her body protested with every movement, and her vision swum before settling. The crowd parted as they climbed the steps together, whispers trailing behind them like a current. Amanda tuned it all out. She had bigger battles ahead. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Amanda could feel every eye on her as she moved down the hallway. There was no hiding the bruises forming on her face or the dried blood at the corner of her mouth, but she wasn't about to stop moving. Too much was riding on today. Jacob walked beside her, his phone buzzing non-stop. "The video's already out there," he muttered, eyes on the screen. "It's spreading across social media. This is about to blow up, Amanda." She swallowed hard, her thoughts churning with what that meant. "I know," she said quietly. As they neared her chambers, they were intercepted by Laura Adams, the police commissioner. Laura's sharp eyes swept over Amanda's disheveled state. "What the hell happened out there?" Laura demanded, her voice low but commanding. "Your officer happened," Amanda said, her voice gaining strength. "Thompson?" Laura's jaw clenched. "Damn it! I'll deal with it." "No," Amanda cut in. "You won't just deal with it, Laura. This isn't something you handle quietly. He assaulted me. That's not something to bury." Laura's expression flickered. "You understand what this means, Amanda. We're in the middle of a high-profile case. The department can't afford another scandal right now." "I don't care what the department can afford," Amanda said, her eyes hard. "I care about justice being done. You can't shield him this time." For a long moment, Laura said nothing. Then, with a heavy breath, she nodded. "Fine, I'll open an internal investigation, but you know this is going to get ugly." "I'm ready for ugly," Amanda said evenly. As Laura walked off, Amanda couldn't shake the sense that whatever was coming would be far bigger than she was prepared for.
Footage of Amanda's fall tore across the internet before she'd even finished composing herself back in her chambers. By the time she'd caught her breath, the story had already detonated across every platform. News networks picked it up almost immediately, activists amplified the outrage, and social media erupted into arguments and demands for accountability. The courtroom she'd walked into that morning now felt like a war zone. This was no longer just about presiding over a difficult case. It had become her own fight against an officer who had attacked her on the courthouse steps. Amanda sat behind her desk, wincing as she shifted in her chair. The ache in her side had sharpened, and every breath reminded her of the force with which she'd hit the pavement. But the physical pain was nothing next to the storm churning inside her. She'd faced bias before, but being physically attacked by an officer sworn to enforce the law cut in no way nothing else had. Amanda pressed a cold compress to her cheek, feeling the bruise darken beneath her fingers. Going to the hospital wasn't an option yet. She needed to stay focused, but she couldn't ignore what had happened either. Her phone buzzed again. Jacob. She answered. "The video's everywhere," he said, tension straining his voice. "The media's running with it, and the protests are ramping up." Amanda closed her eyes, letting the words settle. And Thompson? Nothing from him directly. The department put out a statement, internal investigation, standard language. We both know what that usually means. "They're going to try to bury it," Amanda muttered. "That's exactly what happens if we let them," Jacob said grimly. "They'll spin it as a misunderstanding, say Thompson was just doing his job, that you were in the wrong place. But this isn't only about you, Amanda. It's bigger than that." Amanda set the compress down and looked out at the crowd gathering below her window, the anger, the frustration, the calls for justice. This had stopped being about her case alone. It had become a spark for something much larger, and she understood exactly why people were furious. "I'm not dropping this," she said firmly. "Thompson attacked me. If we don't hold him accountable, what does that tell everyone?" "I agree," Jacob said, "but we have to be careful. The department's already circling the wagons. They've protected men like him for years. He won't be the last unless something changes." Amanda exhaled slowly. Jacob was right. This wasn't about a single bad officer. It was a system that let men like Thompson operate without consequence. The more she turned it over, the clearer it became. She needed to dig far deeper than a single assault charge, even if that put her in more danger. "Start pulling everything on Thompson," she said quietly. "Past cases, complaints, anything that's been buried." "On it," Jacob said without hesitation. "But be careful, Amanda. This goes beyond just him now." "I know," she replied. "I'm not stopping." As she hung up, her office door opened, and Laura Adams stepped in, her uniform crisp, her face unreadable. She shut the door and crossed her arms. "The internal investigation started," Laura said. "Thompson suspended pending review." Amanda leaned forward. "That's not enough, Laura, and you know it." Laura's jaw tightened. "Think about what you're stirring up here. This department is already under scrutiny from other cases. If this escalates, it sets us back years. We need to handle it carefully." "Carefully?" Amanda's voice sharpened. "He assaulted me in front of witnesses, and it's all over the news. What does careful even look like here?" "I'm trying to hold this department together," Laura said. "If this turns into a full-blown scandal, it's not just Thompson who pays for it. We're already losing the public's trust. We don't need more division." Amanda rose and closed the distance between them, the years of friendship and mutual respect straining under the weight of the moment. "This was never about keeping the peace, Laura. It's about justice. If we don't hold people like Thompson accountable, we're no different than them." Neither spoke for a moment. Something like regret flickered across Laura's face before vanishing. "You understand what you're asking for, right? If you push this, it gets ugly. You're not just going after Thompson, you're going after the whole system. I know exactly what I'm doing." Laura's face hardened. "Fine, don't say I didn't warn you." She turned and left, and Amanda stood alone in the heavy silence, the walls of her chambers suddenly feeling far too small. She'd always known justice was never easy to fight for, but this felt more personal than anything she'd faced. She wasn't only a judge now, she was someone the system itself had hurt, and she intended to tear it apart if that's what it required. Later that day, alone at her desk, Amanda's thoughts churned like a storm. The bruise on her cheek had deepened into a constant reminder of the morning. Outside, the protests had only grown louder, and her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the footage went viral. Reporters, activists, colleagues, all wanting a statement. But she knew she had to choose her words carefully. Anything she said would be picked apart by both the press and the public. A knock pulled her back. Jacob entered, his expression grim. "I've been digging into Thompson," he said, shutting the door. "It's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" He dropped a folder on her desk. "Multiple incidents, racial profiling, excessive force. Complaints have been filed against him for years, but they always vanish. No investigations, no consequences. It's like he's untouchable." A knot formed in Amanda's stomach as she flipped through the pages, each one another account of someone hurt by Thompson, each one buried by a department protecting its own. "This runs deeper than just him," she murmured, reaching the final page. "Who's covering for him?" "That's what we need to find out. Whoever it is, they've got serious pull. If we go after Thompson, we're taking on everyone who's been shielding him, too."
Amanda sat back, the full weight of it settling over her. She'd always suspected corruption ran deep, but seeing it laid out this plainly made it undeniable. This wasn't only about her own justice anymore. It was about exposing rot at the core of the department. And that kind of fight carried real risk. "I'm not backing down," she said quietly, more to herself than to him. "We're seeing this through." Jacob nodded, though worry lingered in his eyes. "Just be careful. This could get dangerous." Amanda met his gaze, resolve settling into place. "I'm ready." The next day, Amanda walked the courthouse hallways with her chin up, though the tension in the building was impossible to miss. Whispers trailed her everywhere, eyes lingering too long on the bruises still visible on her face. She could feel the shift in the atmosphere, in every glance, every hushed comment. Reporters waited outside for a statement, and she knew the pressure was only going to keep building. Back in her chambers, she found a small envelope waiting on her desk. She opened it, frowning, and a chill ran through her as she read the hurried scrawl inside, a warning, unsigned. Her mind raced through who could have sent it. Someone in the department? Someone above Laura? She crumpled the paper, jaw tightening. This was exactly the kind of danger Jacob had warned her about, but she wasn't going to let fear steer her decisions. A knock made her jump, and Jacob shoved the note into a drawer just as walked in. "Everything okay?" he asked, studying her. She forced a smile. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind." Jacob sat across from her. "I've been digging more into Thompson's file. It's worse than we realized. Multiple incidents, racial profiling, excessive force, even alleged brutality. But every complaint just disappeared. No investigations, no fallout. Someone's been protecting him." "By who?" Amanda asked. "That's what we still need to find. But whoever it is, they've got real power." Amanda's mind raced. This wasn't one bad officer. It was a network of corruption and cover-ups, and she just walked straight into the middle of it. Fear gnawed at the edges of her resolve, but she pushed it down. She'd already made her choice. "I'm not backing down," she repeated quietly. Jacob offered a faint smile, worry still etched on his face. "I didn't think you would." And in that moment, Amanda knew,
Whatever came next, she wouldn't be facing it alone. The air outside the courthouse stayed thick with tension, the chants of protesters growing louder by the day. From her chamber's window, Amanda watched the crowd swell and felt the full weight of what lay ahead. She'd filed the charges against Thompson, but she understood this was only the start. The trial was underway, and every step forward felt like sinking deeper into a fight she couldn't afford to lose. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere felt suffocating, every whisper, every murmur adding to the pressure. This had stopped just being about Thompson. The deeper she and Jacob dug, the more corruption surfaced, far more than either of them had expected. A knock startled her from her thoughts. Jacob entered, phone buzzing non-stop in his hand. "They're ramping up their defense," he said. "Thompson's legal team is going to throw everything at us." Amanda sank into her chair, exhaustion settling into her bones. The bruise on her face had darkened further, a constant reminder of the assault, though the physical pain paled next to the emotional toll. "I expected that," she said. "They'll try to make this about anything except what actually happened." Jacob's jaw tightened. "They'll lean on the media attention, the protests, anything to distract from the fact that he attacked you. They'll try to paint you as the one who provoked it." "Let them try," Amanda said. "The truth is on our side, and we have the proof." "True," Jacob said, sitting across from her. "But proof doesn't always win, not against a system that's protected men like him for years." Amanda held his gaze, her resolve firming. "That's exactly why I can't stop now. If I don't fight this, they just keep getting away with it." Jacob studied her for a long moment, admiration and worry both plain on his face. "You're right, but determination alone won't be enough to win this." Before she could answer, her office door opened again. Laura Adams, expression hard. "We need to talk," she said, no preamble. Amanda straightened. "What is it, Laura?" Laura's eyes flicked to Jacob, then back. "This has gone too far. The department is in chaos. The protests are only getting worse, and the press won't let up. We need to get ahead of the story before it spins completely out of control."
"I'm not interested in controlling the story," Amanda said evenly. "I'm interested in justice." "Justice?" Laura's eyes narrowed. "You think dragging this department through the mud counts as justice? You're putting everyone at risk, the officers, the public. This stopped being just about you a long time ago." Amanda rose, patience thinning. "It was never just about me. This is about a corrupt system that's protected men like Thompson for years, and you know it." Something flickered across Laura's face, guilt maybe, but it vanished as fast as it appeared. "Be careful, Amanda," she warned. "You're making enemies, powerful ones. This isn't only about Thompson anymore. People in high places don't want this coming out. You're risking more than your career." "I know the risks," Amanda said steadily. "I'm not stopping." Laura held her gaze a long moment, then shook her head. "Fine, don't say I didn't warn you." She turned and left, and once again Amanda stood alone in the heavy silence. The trial opened the following week to a packed courthouse. Reporters, protesters, spectators, all crowded in to watch it unfold. The tension was thick as Amanda took her seat at the front, posture rigid but composed. She felt every eye on her, every whisper at her back, and refused to let any of it rattle her. Jacob sat beside her, flipping through notes, though his focus kept drifting to her. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked quietly. "I don't have a choice," she said, the knot in her stomach tightening. Across the room, Officer Thompson sat at the defense table, face blank, as though none of it touched him. Anger flared in Amanda's chest, but she forced it down. She had to stay focused. The judge entered, and the trial began. Thompson's attorney, Carl Davis, one of the most notorious lawyers in the state, known for bending public opinion and twisting narratives, rose to address the room. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "what happened here was a tragic misunderstanding.
Officer Thompson was simply doing his job, protecting the courthouse, when this unfortunate incident occurred. Amanda's fists clenched under the table as Davis continued, framing his client as a man who'd misjudged a threat and deeply regretted the outcome, but insisting the jury weigh all the facts before rushing to judgment. He sat back down as calmly as if he'd just finished a lecture on parking violations, rather than defended an assault on a sitting judge. Amanda's pulse raced, though her expression stayed neutral. Jacob leaned in. "Don't let him rattle you. Stick to the facts." She nodded and rose when the judge signaled the prosecution to begin. Her heart hammered, but her voice came out clear and steady. "We are not here to discuss a mistake. Officer Thompson used excessive force against me. He didn't ask questions. He didn't assess the situation. He acted out of prejudice and aggression." Her eyes swept the jury box, every face turned toward her. "Officer Thompson saw a black woman standing on the courthouse steps and assumed she didn't belong. He never asked who I was. He never verified anything. He acted on bias, and in doing so, he assaulted me." She paused, letting the weight of it settle. "This isn't only about me. It's about a pattern, one that's gone unchecked far too long. Officer Thompson is part of a system that treats some people as threats simply for the color of their skin. We're here to hold him accountable, not just for what he did to me, but for what it represents." She sat, pulse still racing, as the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. The trial moved forward, evidence, witnesses, arguments from both sides. Thompson's colleagues testified for him, describing a dedicated officer who'd made one costly mistake under pressure, citing his years of service and loyalty. Then came the footage. Multiple angles from bystanders' phones played across the courtroom screen. Thompson's voice unmistakable, his aggression plain as he shoved Amanda to the ground. Gasps rippled through the jury box. Even some of his own supporters shifted uncomfortably. Davis tried to minimize it, calling it a fragment of a bigger picture, but the damage was done. The jury had seen enough. As the trial neared its close, tension outside the courthouse climbed too, the crowd's chants growing louder every time Amanda passed through the doors. Then, just before closing arguments, everything changed. Jacob burst into her office, face pale, hands shaking as he clutched a folder. "We found something," he said. Amanda stood quickly. "What is it?" He hesitated before handing it over. Inside were names, dates, records, evidence of something far larger than they'd imagined. "Thompson's tied into more than just this one case," Jacob said. "There's a network, other officers, high-ranking officials, all covering for him. This goes way beyond what we thought." Amanda stared at the documents, heart pounding. This was bigger than she'd ever imagined. Thompson wasn't just one bad officer. He was a piece of a corrupt system that had shielded him and others like him for years.
"What do we do with this?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Jacob's expression was resolute. "We expose all of it." The courtroom fell silent, every breath held as all eyes turned to the jury, ready to deliver its verdict. Amanda sat at the prosecution's table, heart pounding, palms damp as she clasped her hands together. Weeks of fighting, accusations, and hard truths pressed down on her chest. Across from her, Thompson sat motionless, his face unreadable, his attorney murmuring something he didn't seem to register. The jury filed back in, and Judge Reynolds called the room to order. The jury foreman rose, paper in hand. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Officer Thomas Thompson, guilty of abuse of authority and assault." For a beat, the room froze. Then murmurs rippled outward, gasps, whispered relief. Amanda felt the tension she'd carried for weeks finally loosen. They had won. Thompson was guilty. Jacob, beside her, pulled her into a brief, tight hug. "You did it, Amanda." She nodded, throat tight with emotion, the relief almost too much to absorb all at once. She hadn't realized how much the fight had drained her until this exact moment.
Across the room, Thompson's composure finally cracked, his face twisting with disbelief and anger as bailiffs approached. The judge banged his gavel for order, then addressed Thompson directly. "You have been found guilty of abuse of authority and assault, a serious breach of the public's trust in you as an officer of the law. Sentencing will follow at a separate hearing. Let this stand as a reminder that no one is above the law." As the bailiffs led Thompson away, Amanda felt an unexpected flicker of pity. He was a product of a system that had enabled this kind of conduct for too long, but that didn't excuse what he'd done. He had to answer for it, same as anyone else. The courtroom's tension didn't vanish with the verdict. It only shifted from anxious anticipation to uncertainty about what would come next. The win was real, but it was only the beginning. That afternoon, Amanda stood on the courthouse steps, facing a sea of protesters and reporters, larger now than at any point since the trial began, signs waving, voices rising. She took a breath, scanning the crowd's hopeful faces. John Marshall, the journalist who'd covered the story from day one, stepped forward with his microphone, a small nod of respect in his eyes. "Judge Braun, now that the verdict's in, how are you feeling?" Amanda's gaze swept the crowd. She could see their hope, their anticipation for an ending, but she knew better. "I feel relieved," she said clearly, "but this is only the beginning. Today's verdict addressed one man, one case. The system that allowed this to happen is still standing, and that's where our focus needs to go now." John scribbled in his notepad, "So what's next for you?" "I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to push for real reform in this city, in this system. We can't stop here." The crowd erupted in applause, and something swelled in Amanda's chest. The road ahead would be long, but she wasn't walking it alone, and that gave her strength. As John moved off to speak with others, a hand landed on her shoulder. She turned to find Jacob. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, exhaustion pulling at her, but steady. "Yeah, I think I am." That evening, Amanda came home with the day's weight still heavy on her shoulders. Her phone lit up with messages the moment she stepped through the door. Friends, colleagues, even strangers who'd followed the trial, all reaching out with support. She set the phone down and rubbed her temples. The fight was far from finished. Today had been a win, but it had also exposed just how deep the corruption ran. The documents Jacob uncovered implicated not only Thompson, but others inside the department and city government. Pursuing it meant risking everything, her career, her safety, maybe more, but she couldn't look away, not now. A soft knock drew her to the door. She opened it to find Jacob holding a bottle of wine, a tired smile on his face. "Figured you could use this." She smiled and stepped aside. "I figured right." They settled into her living room, wine poured, the day's events replaying quietly in her mind. After a while, Jacob spoke. "You know this is just the start, right? Once you move on those documents, they're going to come after you hard." She studied her glass. "I know, but I can't let it go. Not after everything." "I'm with you, whatever you need," Jacob said. She looked up at him, gratitude plain on her face. "Thank you, Jacob. I couldn't have gotten this far without you." He raised his glass. "To justice." She hesitated, then lifted hers as well. "To justice." Their glasses met with a soft clink, quiet in the room, but to Amanda it felt like the loudest sound in the world, a declaration that she wasn't backing down. The night wore on, and the exhaustion that had clung to her all day finally began to ease. She let herself breathe, let herself relax, if only a little. The fight ahead would be brutal, but for this one quiet moment, she allowed herself to believe things could change, that maybe they'd just taken the first real step towards something better. The path forward was uncertain, full of dangers she couldn't yet name, but sitting there with Jacob, the wine warm in her hand and his support steady beside her, Amanda knew one thing without doubt. She was ready. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone, and for tonight, that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Rebuilt Stories so you don't miss what's next. Drop a comment with your thoughts and check out our other videos for more stories like this one.